My name is Allison Reynolds. I'm 28 years old, and I just secretly sold the country house my grandmother left me. The house my parents were planning to sell to buy my younger sister Brittany an apartment. The house filled with childhood memories, the only place I felt truly safe. When they announced their plan over dinner, something inside me snapped. I made a decision that would change everything for all of us. Before I tell you what happened, where are you watching this from? Hit like and subscribe if you've ever had to stand up to family who crossed your boundaries. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this ends. The country house sits about 40 miles outside the city, nestled between rolling hills with a view that takes your breath away at sunset. My grandmother bought it in the 70s when land was still affordable in the area. It's not extravagant, a modest two-bedroom farmhouse with creaky wooden floors and windows that stick in humid weather. But the property spans 2 acres, with an apple orchard that produces the sweetest fruit you've ever tasted and a garden that blooms with wildflowers every spring. After inheriting it 3 years ago, I poured my heart, time, and savings into renovations. I replaced the leaking roof, updated the ancient plumbing, and restored the original hardwood floors that had been hidden under decades of carpet. I painted the exterior a soft butter yellow, just as Grandma had always wanted but never got around to doing. Every weekend for months, I drove out there with supplies in my trunk, working until my muscles ached. I wasn't just maintaining a property, I was preserving my grandmother's legacy. My grandmother, Elizabeth, was the one person who truly saw me. While my parents attended every one of Brittany's dance recitals and soccer games, it was Grandma who came to my debate competitions and art shows. When I didn't make cheerleading in 9th grade and cried for days, my parents told me to toughen up, but Grandma drove an hour to bring me homemade cookies and tell me stories about her own disappointments and how they led to better things. In the kitchen of that country house, she taught me how to make her famous apple pie, carefully explaining how to cut the butter into the flour until it resembled course meal. Patience, she would say, is the secret ingredient most people forget. On the porch swing, she would listen to my teenage problems without judgment, offering wisdom wrapped in kindness. People will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel, she would remind me, her voice gentle but firm. When she passed away after a brief illness, I was devastated. The reading of her will surprise everyone, especially my parents. The house, along with a modest savings account, was left explicitly to me. The legal documentation was crystal clear. The property was mine alone, not family property as my parents seemed to assume. They masked their disappointment with comments like, "Well, of course, we'll help you manage it, and it's really a family asset." I nodded and thanked them, but the deed had my name on it, and I knew exactly what Grandma intended. The favoritism in our family wasn't subtle. Brittany, 2 years younger than me, was the star from the moment she was born. While I was bookish and introverted, Brittany was outgoing and charming. She was a natural athlete, homecoming queen, and the recipient of a partial college scholarship, which she dropped out of after 3 semesters to find herself. My accomplishments, graduating with honors, securing a job at a prestigious marketing firm, earning promotions, were acknowledged with distracted nods while Brittany's smallest achievements were celebrated with parties and gifts. "Your sister needs more encouragement," my mother would explain when I questioned the disparity. "You've always been so independent." Independence wasn't a choice, it was a necessity in a household where attention was a limited resource that rarely flowed my way. When Brittany decided to start a boutique fitness studio at 24 with no business experience, my parents refinanced their house to provide startup capital. The business folded within 8 months. When she wanted to become a travel influencer, they funded trips to Bali and Greece for her Instagram. That lasted about 6 months. Her pattern was consistent: enthusiasm, investment, abandonment, then on to the next exciting venture. Throughout it all, my parents' support never wavered. Meanwhile, I put myself through graduate school with student loans and a part-time job. When I needed a car to commute to my first professional position, I saved for the down payment myself. I learned early that requesting help would result in lectures about responsibility and budgeting, lessons never directed at my sister. I established boundaries with my family over time. I limited holiday visits to 2 days instead of week-long stays. I stopped sharing details about my salary or savings after my mother suggested I help out with Brittany's credit card debt. I deflected questions about my romantic life after my father made dismissive comments about Michael, my boyfriend of 2 years, for choosing a career in education rather than something more ambitious. About 6 months ago, I began noticing strange comments from my parents. My mother called asking detailed questions about the country house, the square footage, the condition of the roof, whether I'd had it appraised recently. My father mentioned knowing a great real estate agent who specialized in properties with character. At the time, I brushed it off as casual conversation, but looking back, they were laying groundwork. Then came the phone call I wasn't meant to overhear. I had arrived early for Sunday dinner and let myself in with my key. From the kitchen, I could hear my father in his study, speaking emphatically. The market is hot right now, especially for properties with land. We could easily get 300,000, maybe more, he was saying. Yes, we'll talk to Allison this weekend. She'll understand this is what's best for everyone. Brittany needs this opportunity, and that house is just sitting there most of the time anyway. I stood frozen, keys still in my hand, as the reality of their plan washed over me. They were discussing selling my house, my inheritance, my sanctuary, without even consulting me. And for what? Another of Brittany's opportunities that would likely evaporate like all the others. I composed myself, made a noisy entrance, and pretended I'd just arrived. Throughout dinner, I waited for them to broach the subject, but they didn't. They were waiting for the right moment to present their plan as a fait accompli. The worst part wasn't the plan itself, it was the assumption that I would simply go along with it. After 28 years, they still saw me as someone whose needs and feelings could be overlooked for Brittany's benefit. That realization hurt more than the potential loss of the house. But I kept my expression neutral and my thoughts to myself. I needed time to process before responding. As I drove home that night, one thought crystallized in my mind. This was about more than a house. This was about respect, boundaries, and finally being seen. I didn't know yet what I would do, but for once, I wouldn't be the one to compromise. The ambush came the following Friday. My mother called to invite me to dinner, mentioning that Brittany would be there and they had exciting family news to share. I almost declined, sensing what was coming, but decided it was better to face the situation head-on. The dining room was set with the good china, a sure sign of a significant occasion. My father had opened an expensive bottle of wine, and Brittany was practically bouncing in her seat with poorly contained excitement. My mother had prepared my favorite meal, beef bourguignon, an obvious attempt to soften whatever blow they were about to deliver. "Allison, we have something important to discuss," my father began after we'd settled into our meal. His tone was authoritative, the same one he'd used to announce family decisions throughout my childhood. "Your mother and I have been talking about the future, specifically about helping Brittany get established." My sister flashed me a smile that didn't reach her eyes. At 26, she was still getting established, while I had been supporting myself fully since 22. "As you know, the real estate market in the city is impossible for young people," my mother continued smoothly. "Brittany has been trying to save for a down payment, but with rents so high." This was news to me. Last I heard, Brittany was working part-time at a boutique and spending her weekends at music festivals. Saving had never been her strong suit. "We found the perfect solution," my father announced, lifting his wine glass as if in toast. "The country house. It's primarily a weekend place for you, and honestly, the maintenance must be such a burden with your busy career." I set down my fork carefully. "What about the country house?" "Well, if we sell it now, we could get top dollar. More than enough to buy Brittany a nice condo downtown. It would be a win-win." My mother beamed as if she'd just solved a complex puzzle. Brittany leaned forward. "I found the most amazing place in the Riverside district. 2 bedrooms, rooftop access, walking distance to all the best restaurants. It would be perfect for my new lifestyle brand I'm launching. Another new venture." Another expectation of family funding. I've already spoken to my friend at River City Realty, my father added. He can list the house next week. We'll handle everything. You won't need to lift a finger. The room seemed to tilt slightly. They had already contacted a realtor for my house without consulting me. That house belongs to me, I said, my voice quieter than intended. Grandma left it to me, not to the family. My mother waved dismissively. Oh, we know that, honey. But family helps family. Brittany needs this opportunity to get ahead. And what about my attachment to the house? The work I've put into it? The memories it holds? My voice grew stronger with each question. Don't be sentimental, Allison, my father said firmly. It's just a building. You can make memories anywhere. Brittany reached across the table to touch my hand. I pulled away before she could make contact. Don't you want me to have a good start? She asked, her expression shifting to the hurt look that had gotten her out of trouble countless times. You're already so established in your career. You have savings. I'm still trying to find my path. By having our parents sell my house? The one thing Grandma wanted me to have. The unfairness of it all was beginning to sink in, bringing with it a wave of anger I rarely allowed myself to feel toward my family. We raised you to be generous, my mother said, her tone sharpening. To care about your sister's well-being. And what about my well-being? I countered. Has anyone at this table considered that? My father's expression hardened. We've supported you your entire life, have you? The question escaped before I could contain it. Because from where I sit, I've been largely on my own since I was 18, while you've bankrolled one failed venture after another for Brittany. That's not fair. Brittany protested, tears filling her eyes on cue. Fair? You want to talk about fair? I was standing now, though I didn't remember getting up. Was it fair when you all skipped my college graduation for Brittany's weekend beach trip? Was it fair when Dad used the money he promised for my first apartment security deposit to bail Brittany out of credit card debt? Is it fair that not once, have any of you asked what that house means to me before deciding to sell it? My mother's face had gone pale. You're being dramatic. We're just trying to help your sister. By taking something that belongs to me. Something I love. Something I've invested in. The house is legally mine. I have the only say in whether it's sold, and my answer is no. My father's voice rose to match mine. After everything we've done for you, what exactly have you done for me that compares to what you've done for Brittany? I challenged, years of suppressed hurt bubbling to the surface. Name one thing. The silence that followed was deafening. Brittany broke it with a sob. I knew you were jealous of me, but I never thought you'd be this selfish. That word, selfish, was the final straw. How many times had setting a boundary or expressing a need been labeled as selfishness in this family? I'm leaving, I announced, grabbing my purse. And to be absolutely clear, the house is not for sale. Not now, not ever. Certainly not to fund another of Brittany's fresh starts. Allison Grace Reynolds, don't you walk out that door, my mother called as I headed for the exit. We're not finished discussing this. I turned back one last time. Yes, we are. The house is mine. The decision is mine. And I've made it. The drive to the country house took nearly an hour, tears blurring my vision for much of it. By the time I pulled into the gravel driveway, my anger had given way to a profound sadness. I unlocked the front door and walked through rooms filled with memories, the living room where Grandma and I had played board games during summer storms, the kitchen where she taught me to bake, the back porch where we'd sat in comfortable silence watching fireflies emerge at dusk. In her bedroom, now a guest room, I opened the closet that still held a few of her belongings I couldn't bear to part with. Her cardigan, soft from years of wear. A box of costume jewelry she'd let me play with as a child. Photo albums documenting decades of family history. The real history, not the revised version my parents preferred where Brittany was the sun around which we all orbited. I sat on the edge of the bed, my grandmother's voice vivid in my memory. Stand up for yourself, Allie. Kindness matters, but so does self-respect. Don't let anyone convince you that your feelings don't count. Lying back on the quilt she had made, I reached a decision. My family would never respect my boundaries unless I enforced them. They would continue to take until nothing remained that was truly mine. For the first time, I needed to put myself first, not out of spite or revenge, but out of self-preservation. My phone buzzed with texts from my parents and Brittany, alternating between demands that I return to finish the discussion and guilt-laden messages about family loyalty. I turned off my phone and watched darkness fall outside the window, a plan slowly taking shape in my mind. The next morning, I called Jessica, my best friend since college and the person who knew better than anyone the dynamics of my family. "They did what?" she exclaimed after I explained the situation. "That's beyond entitled, Ollie. That's delusional." "I know," I sighed, pacing the kitchen of the country house. "But they genuinely believed I would just go along with it. That's what hurts the most." "So, what are you going to do?" Jessica asked. "Because you know they're not going to drop this. Your dad especially has never taken no for an answer." "I'm not sure," I admitted. "Part of me wants to just stand my ground and refuse. But another part." "Another part what?" Jessica prompted when I trailed off. "What if I sell it myself?" The thought had formed sometime during my sleepless night. Before they can pressure me further or try some other angle. There was a pause on the line. "That's actually brilliant. Take control of the situation. But are you sure you want to sell?" "I know how much that place means to you." It was the right question. Did I want to sell the house that held so many precious memories? No. But I also couldn't bear the thought of it becoming a source of ongoing conflict, of my parents showing up with realtors, of Brittany's entitled expectations. The house deserved better than becoming a battleground. "I think I need to," I said finally. "Not for them, but for me. On my terms." "Then do it right," Jessica advised. "Talk to a lawyer first. Make sure your parents can't interfere." The following Monday, I took a personal day and met with Diane Hargrove, an attorney specializing in real estate and inheritance law. Her office was warm and inviting, much like her demeanor, but her eyes were sharp as she reviewed the documents I'd brought. "The situation is quite straightforward from a legal perspective," she assured me, adjusting her glasses. "The house was left to you directly, not to your parents. The deed is in your name alone. You have absolute right to sell or keep the property as you see fit." "My parents seem to think they have some say in the matter," I explained. "They don't," she stated firmly. "Not legally. However, given the family dynamics you've described, I suggest proceeding carefully to avoid unnecessary conflict." She recommended documenting any further attempts by my parents to sell the property without my consent and advised me on selecting a realtor from outside our immediate community to minimize the chance of word getting back to my family. "I'll also prepare a cease and desist letter should your parents contact realtors claiming authority to sell the property," she added. "Hopefully it won't be necessary." Armed with legal confirmation of what I already knew, I began researching the real estate market. To my surprise, property values in the area had skyrocketed in recent months due to an influx of city dwellers seeking country retreats during the pandemic. My father's estimate of $300,000 was woefully outdated. Similar properties were selling for close to $450,000. Through a colleague's recommendation, I connected with Meredith Simmons, a realtor based in a town 20 miles from the house. After viewing the property, she was enthusiastic about its potential. "The renovations you've done are exactly what buyers in this market are looking for," she explained as we walked through the rooms. "Authentic character with modern conveniences. And 2 acres with established fruit trees? In this location? We could list at $475 and still expect multiple offers." The figure made my head spin. It was substantially more than I had anticipated, enough to make a significant difference in my financial future. Meredith and I developed a strategy for a discreet sale. No sign in the yard, no open houses, only private showings with pre-qualified buyers. The listing would appear online, but without the exact address displayed. That evening, I shared my plans with Michael over dinner at his apartment. I valued his perspective not just as my boyfriend, but as someone who had always supported my independence. "I hate that they've put you in this position," he said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "But I think you're making the right call. That house should be a source of joy, not stress." "But am I being deceitful?" I questioned, voicing my deepest concern. Selling it without telling them? Michael considered this thoughtfully. Would they extend you the same courtesy? They were planning to sell your property without your permission. You're simply exercising your legal right to sell what's yours on your own terms. His validation strengthened my resolve. The next day, I opened a new bank account at a different bank than the one my family used, ensuring the proceeds from the sale would be completely separate from any accounts my parents might know about. Over the next 2 weeks, I made several trips to the house, each time filling my car with personal items I couldn't bear to part with: Grandma's collection of first edition novels, the quilt from her bedroom, photo albums, and the wooden recipe box containing handwritten cards in her elegant script. I found her journals in the bottom drawer of the desk in the study, 5 volumes spanning the last 15 years of her life. I hadn't known they existed, and the discovery felt like a gift. I also focused on small improvements that would increase the house's appeal: fresh mulch in the garden beds, new hardware on the kitchen cabinets, power washing the stone walkway. Each task was bittersweet, improving the home while preparing to let it go. The guilt surfaced at unexpected moments. Arranging flowers in Grandma's favorite vase on the kitchen island, I was suddenly overcome with doubt. Was I betraying her memory by selling the house she loved? But then I remembered her words. Things are just things, Ellie. It's the memories you carry with you that matter. She had left me the house to provide security and happiness, not to become a source of family strife. Meanwhile, my parents continued their campaign. My mother called daily, alternating between apologies for the misunderstanding and renewed attempts to convince me that selling the house was the sensible choice. My father emailed links to condos he thought Brittany would like, as if my objection had merely been about the specific property they'd chosen for her. Brittany sent long, emotional texts about feeling rejected and unloved. I responded minimally, buying time while the sale proceeded. By the end of the 3rd week, Meredith had shown the house to 7 potential buyers. 3 made offers above the asking price. The highest bid came from a young couple with 2 small children. The husband was a woodworker who fell in love with the barn that could become his workshop, and the wife, a pediatrician, envisioned their children growing up with space to run and trees to climb. Their offer of $510,000, with a flexible closing timeline, felt right. These were people who would love the house as it deserved to be loved. As I signed the acceptance papers in Meredith's office, emotions warred within me: grief at letting go, relief at taking control, anxiety about the inevitable confrontation with my family. But beneath it all was a growing sense of empowerment. For perhaps the first time in my life, I was making a major decision based solely on what I believed was right for me. "Congratulations," Meredith said as I signed the last document. "You've just taken a big step toward your future." I managed a smile through tears and said goodbye to a piece of my past. The wheels were in motion. In 45 days, the country house would belong to someone else. All that remained was to prepare for the storm that would break when my family discovered what I'd done. The process of selling a house involves countless details, each one an opportunity for discovery by those who shouldn't know. I became vigilant about covering my tracks. I had all paperwork sent to my work address or Jessica's apartment. I scheduled home inspections and appraisals for times I knew my family would be occupied elsewhere. I made excuses for why they couldn't visit the house: plumbing issues, scheduled maintenance, a writing retreat I desperately needed. 3 weeks after accepting the offer, I met the buyers, Eric and Lydia Morales, for their second walkthrough. Watching them plan where furniture would go and hearing their 4-year-old daughter exclaim over the window seat in what would become her bedroom eased some of my guilt. Lydia, with her warm smile and gentle manner, reminded me of my grandmother in subtle ways. "We can't thank you enough for choosing our offer," she said as we stood in the kitchen. "I know you must have had higher bids." I did, I admitted. But money wasn't the only consideration. I wanted the house to go to a family who would appreciate it. Eric nodded, his arm around his wife's shoulders. "We plan to be here for the long haul. Our kids will grow up climbing those apple trees. The apples are best in late September," I told them. "Sweet, but still a little tart. Perfect for pies." "You'll have to share your recipe," Lydia said. "I'd like that." And I meant it. Somehow, passing on my grandmother's apple pie recipe felt like maintaining a connection to the house even after it was no longer mine. As the closing date approached, I began the delicate process of moving my remaining belongings. Each weekend, I filled my car with boxes, storing them temporarily in a spare room in Jessica's apartment building. I was methodical, removing items that would be noticed if missing, replacing them with similar but less meaningful substitutes from home goods stores. The silver-framed photos were replaced with identical frames holding the same photos. The antique lamp from the guest room was swapped with a modern reproduction. I was creating the illusion that everything remained unchanged while systematically extracting my heart from the house. There were close calls. One Sunday afternoon, as I was loading the last of Grandma's china into my car, a neighbor waved from across the street. She was friendly with my mother, and I held my breath, hoping she wouldn't come over for a chat. Fortunately, she was walking her dog and merely offered a casual greeting before continuing on her way. Another day, I answered a call from my father while standing in the emptied master bedroom. "Where are you?" he asked, background noise suggesting he was driving. "We thought we might stop by the house, talk things through in person." My heart raced. "I'm actually in the city today," I lied, hating the necessity of deception. "Meeting Michael's parents for lunch." It was the first excuse that came to mind, one that would deter him without raising suspicion. "Another time, then," he said, disappointment evident in his voice. "Your mother, and I really want to resolve this, Allison." The guilt that followed these interactions was heavy, but not as heavy as the resentment I felt at being forced into this position. Had they respected my boundaries from the beginning, had they approached me with consideration rather than assumption, I might have been open to discussing options that could have helped Brittany while preserving my connection to the house. But they had shown their hand, and their priorities, too clearly. 2 days before closing, I made my final visit to the empty house. The rooms echoed with my footsteps as I walked from one to another, saying goodbye. In the kitchen, I ran my hand along the countertop where Grandma had taught me to roll pie dough. In the living room, I stood by the fireplace where we had roasted marshmallows during power outages. On the back porch, I sat in the spot where her rocking chair had been, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. I left a letter for the new owners on the kitchen island, sharing the history of the house and some of its quirks, the hall closet door that needed a gentle lift to close properly, the best spot in the garden for tomatoes, the way the light filled the dining room on winter mornings. I included my grandmother's apple pie recipe and my email address, an open door to a different kind of connection than the one I was losing. The next morning, I met with Meredith and the Morales family at the title company office. Eric and Lydia brought their children, Maya, 4, and Daniel, 6, dressed in their best clothes for the occasion. Daniel solemnly handed me a crayon drawing of the house, complete with a rainbow and the words, "Thank you," in careful printing across the top. It was the kind of innocent gesture that breaks and heals your heart simultaneously. "We'll take good care of it," Lydia promised as we waited for the final papers. The signing itself was anticlimactic, a flurry of signatures, initials, and notary stamps. And then it was done. The keys changed hands. The house that had been my grandmother's, then briefly mine, now belonged to the Morales family. The proceeds were transferred to my new account, a sum that represented both loss and possibility. As I drove away for the last time, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Grief for what I was leaving behind, relief that the secret phase was ending, anxiety about the confrontation to come, and, beneath it all, a growing sense of peace with my decision. That evening, alone in my apartment, I opened the first of my grandmother's journals. On the inside cover, she had written a quote, "Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let go of what you thought your life would be and embrace what it is becoming." I traced the words with my finger, drawing strength from her wisdom across time and distance. Tomorrow, I would face my family. Tonight, I would honor my grandmother by trusting my own judgment, just as she had taught me. The revelation came sooner than I had planned. The morning after closing, I received a frantic call from my mother. "Allison, there are strangers at the country house. They say they bought it." What's going on? My stomach dropped. I had planned to tell my parents myself on my terms after giving myself a day to prepare. The Morales family wasn't supposed to begin moving in until the weekend. Clearly, they had been as eager to start their new chapter as I had been to close mine. I'll explain everything, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. Can you and Dad come to my apartment this evening? No, we need answers now, she insisted. Your father is talking to these people. They have paperwork. Allison, tell me you didn't. I did, I confirmed, ripping off the bandage. The house was mine to sell, and I sold it. The silence that followed was deafening, followed by a storm of questions and accusations. I held the phone away from my ear, listening to fragments of my mother's response. How could you, behind our backs, after everything? Brittany will be, your father is. When she paused to draw breath, I spoke firmly. I'll explain everything tonight. 7 o'clock at my apartment. Bring Dad and Brittany if you want. Then I ended the call, knowing I needed to prepare for the confrontation to come. I spent the day in a state of heightened anxiety, alternating between rehearsing what I would say and distracting myself with work emails. Michael offered to be present for support, but I declined. This was a conversation I needed to have with my family alone. At exactly 7, my doorbell rang. All three of them stood in the hallway. My father's face flushed with anger, my mother's eyes red from crying, Brittany looking both victimized and vindictive. Come in, I said, stepping aside. I had prepared the space deliberately, documents spread on the coffee table, a pitcher of water and glasses set out, comfortable seating arranged to give everyone space. No one sat. My father started in immediately. How dare you sell that house without consulting us? Do you have any idea what you've done? I sold my house, I replied, working to keep my voice level. The house that was left to me in Grandma's will. The house that you were planning to sell without my consent to buy Brittany an apartment. We were going to discuss it as a family, my mother protested. No, you weren't, I countered. You had already contacted a realtor. You presented it as a decision already made. You assumed I would simply go along with it, as I always have. Brittany stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. You've ruined everything. That apartment was perfect for my new business venture. Do you know how hard it is to find affordable property in the city? How am I supposed to get ahead when my own sister sabotages me? The same way most people do, I replied. By working for it. By saving. By making responsible choices. You always think you're so much better than me, she spat. Miss Perfect with her perfect job and perfect boyfriend. You've been jealous of me our entire lives. I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of this accusation. Jealous? Of what? The constant bailouts? The endless fresh starts? The complete lack of consequences for your actions? Enough, my father interrupted. The practical matter remains. What did you do with the money? Of course that would be his primary concern, not my feelings, not my autonomy, but the financial impact of my decision. That's none of your business, I said firmly. It absolutely is our business, he insisted. That money should be going toward Brittany's apartment. That was the whole point of selling the house. No, I stated, my voice growing stronger. The house was mine. The decision was mine. And the proceeds are mine. My mother sank onto the couch, finally seeming to grasp the reality of the situation. How much did you get for it? I hesitated, then decided transparency might help them understand the magnitude of what they had tried to take from me. $510,000. All three of them stared at me in shock. That's nearly twice what your father thought it was worth, my mother said weakly. I know. I did my research. I found a good realtor. I entertained multiple offers. The pride in my voice was unmistakable. I handled it professionally and responsibly. You need to transfer that money to us immediately, my father demanded, his tone brooking no argument. We're your parents. We know what's best for the family as a whole. That's not going to happen, I replied, sliding a folder across the coffee table. These are copies of Grandma's will, the deed to the house, and the legal transfer of ownership to the new owners. My lawyer has confirmed multiple times that I acted within my legal rights. Legal rights, my father scoffed. Is that all that matters to you? What about family obligation? What about loyalty? Loyalty, I repeated, feeling a surge of anger I had suppressed for too long. Where was your loyalty when you dismissed my feelings about the house? Where was your loyalty when you planned to sell my inheritance without my permission? Where has your loyalty been my entire life when it comes to treating your daughters equally? We have always treated you both fairly, my mother protested weakly. No, you haven't, I stated firmly. And deep down, you know it. Brittany has been given every advantage, every benefit of the doubt, every opportunity, while I've had to fight for recognition and support. Brittany had moved to the window, her back to us, shoulders shaking with sobs or rage, I couldn't tell which. I'm going to talk to Edward, my father said, naming his attorney friend. There must be some way to contest the sale, to recover the funds. There isn't, I assured him. The sale is final. The money is secure. But go ahead and waste your time and Edward's if it makes you feel better. My mother's expression had shifted from distress to calculation. Allison, honey, I know we may have been insensitive about your attachment to the house. But surely you can see that Brittany needs this help more than you do. You're so capable, so independent. Couldn't you at least share some of the proceeds? For family peace. The attempt at manipulation was so transparent it almost made me laugh. My decision is final, I said. I suggest you all adjust to that reality. Then you leave us no choice, my father declared. Until you reconsider this selfish action, we'll have to reconsider our relationship with you. What does that mean exactly? I asked, though I already knew. It means you're not welcome at family functions, he stated coldly. It means we can't support someone who would betray her family this way. Despite expecting this reaction, the words stung. I had spent my entire life seeking their approval, working to earn the love they gave Brittany freely. But in this moment, I found myself strangely unmoved by the threat. If that's your decision, I accept it, I said quietly. But I want to be clear, I didn't betray anyone. I protected myself from being betrayed. My mother began to cry in earnest now. Brittany turned from the window, her expression vengeful. I'm going to make sure everyone knows what you did. Cousins, aunts, uncles, friends, everyone will know you chose money over family. Tell them whatever you want, I replied, suddenly exhausted by the drama. Those who matter will understand. The confrontation continued for another hour, cycling through the same accusations and defenses. My father threatened legal action. My mother vacillated between guilt trips and pleas for compromise. Brittany alternated between tearful victimhood and vicious attacks on my character. I stood my ground, becoming calmer as they grew more agitated. Finally, my father announced they were leaving. At the door, my mother turned back, her expression wounded. I never thought you would put yourself before your sister's happiness. It was the perfect encapsulation of the family dynamic that had brought us to this point, the assumption that my sister's happiness should always take precedence over mine. I'm not putting myself before Brittany, I corrected her. I'm putting myself equal to Brittany. There's a difference. After they left, I sat in the sudden silence of my apartment, emotionally drained but oddly peaceful. I had expected to feel crushing guilt or doubt after the confrontation. Instead, I felt unburdened, as if years of accumulated resentment had finally been released. The fallout was swift and extensive. Brittany made good on her threat, posting a tearful video on Instagram detailing how I had stolen her future and broken our parents' hearts. My phone filled with messages from extended family members and childhood friends, some expressing shock and disappointment, others requesting my side of the story. I responded to none of them, taking Jessica's advice to let the initial wave of drama crest before engaging. Only my Aunt Caroline, my mother's sister, reached out with unambiguous support. Elizabeth knew exactly what she was doing when she left you that house. Stand your ground, sweetheart. The emotional toll became evident in other aspects of my life. I found myself distracted at work, missing deadlines and fumbling presentations. Sleep became elusive, my nights filled with circular arguments in my head, imagining what I should have said or might say in future confrontations. Michael remained steadfast in his support, listening without judgment, reminding me to eat when I forgot, holding me when the doubts crept in. Jessica became my fierce defender, screening calls and reminding me of the years of inequity that had led to this breaking point. This isn't about a house or money, she insisted during one particularly low moment. This is about you finally saying enough after a lifetime of being treated as less important than your sister. A month after the confrontation, I received a formal letter from my father's attorney suggesting mediation to resolve the dispute over assets. I forwarded it to Diane Hargrove, who responded with a concise letter affirming the legality of the sale and declining mediation as there was no legitimate dispute to resolve. 6 weeks in, Brittany escalated her campaign. She contacted my company through their public relations email, implying I had misappropriated family funds and questioning my ethical fitness for my position. Fortunately, my manager, who had witnessed my professionalism for years, dismissed the allegations without involving me directly, though she gently suggested I consider therapy to deal with the obvious family stress. It was good advice. I started seeing Dr. Mercer, a therapist specializing in family dynamics, who helped me understand the patterns that had defined our family, my parents' enabling of Brittany, my role as the responsible yet overlooked child, the unhealthy expectation that I would continually sacrifice for my sister's benefit. You didn't just sell a house, Dr. Mercer observed during one session. You broke a generational pattern. That's both powerful and frightening, for you and for them. 2 months after the sale, the daily barrage of messages and manipulation attempts began to slow. My parents, perhaps realizing their tactics weren't working, shifted to silence. No calls, no texts, no emails. Brittany, finding limited traction with her victim narrative, moved on to documenting her journey of healing from family betrayal to modest engagement on social media. The silence was both a relief and a new kind of pain. Despite everything, they were still my family. The absence of connection, however dysfunctional that connection had been, left a hollow space that the newfound peace didn't entirely fill. But as summer turned to fall, I began to recognize that the space wasn't just empty, it was also open. Open to new possibilities, new boundaries, new ways of defining family that weren't based on obligation or guilt, but on mutual respect and genuine care. And in that opening, I found unexpected strength. The autumn leaves were turning when I received an unexpected email from my mother. It had been nearly 3 months since our confrontation, 3 months of strained silence, punctuated only by occasional updates from mutual connections. Allison, she wrote, I've been doing a lot of thinking. I won't pretend to fully understand or agree with your actions, but I miss my daughter. Could we meet for coffee? Just the two of us? I read the message several times, searching for the usual manipulation tactics: guilt, obligation, veiled demands. Finding none, I cautiously agreed to meet at a neutral location, a cafe midway between our homes. She was already there when I arrived, looking smaller somehow, more vulnerable than I remembered. The confident, always in control mother of my childhood seemed diminished, with new lines around her eyes and gray showing at her temples. Thank you for coming, she said as I sat down across from her. I wasn't sure you would. I wasn't sure either, I admitted. We ordered a latte for her, black coffee for me, and then sat in awkward silence until our drinks arrived. How have you been? She finally asked. Honestly? It's been difficult, I said, but also clarifying. She nodded, turning her cup in small circles on the table. Your father is still very angry. I'm not surprised. Brittany has moved in with us again. She says it's temporary, until she finds the right opportunity. There was a note in her voice I hadn't heard before, a hint of weariness, perhaps even frustration. And how do you feel about that? I asked. She looked up, clearly surprised by the question. It's fine. She's our daughter. We want to help her. Just like you've always helped her, I observed, keeping my tone neutral. My mother's gaze dropped back to her coffee. That's part of what I've been thinking about. The ways we've helped our daughters differently. I waited, giving her space to continue. When you were little, you were so independent. You could entertain yourself for hours with books or art projects. Brittany always needed more attention, more guidance. It became a pattern, her needing, us giving. She sighed. I never stopped to consider that maybe you needed things too. You just never asked. I did ask, I corrected gently. Many times. But the answer was usually that I should be more understanding of Brittany's needs. She winced, acknowledging the truth of this. Your grandmother used to tell me I was creating two different futures for my daughters. I didn't understand what she meant then. I think I'm beginning to now. We talked for over 2 hours, covering ground we had never explored before. She spoke of her own upbringing, of being the responsible oldest child while her younger brother was indulged. She had unconsciously recreated the pattern with her own children, but with the roles reversed. I'm not saying I agree with how you handled the house situation, she clarified. But I understand better why you felt you had no other option. We didn't give you one. It wasn't an apology exactly, but it was an acknowledgement, the first real one I could remember receiving from either parent. I've used some of the money to start a scholarship, I told her, sharing something I hadn't planned to reveal. In Grandma's name. For first-generation college students interested in horticulture. She would have liked that. My mother's eyes filled with tears. She would have. That's really lovely, Allison. As we prepared to leave, she asked hesitantly, would you be willing to meet with your father sometime? Not right away, but when things have cooled a bit more. Maybe, I said, not ready to commit. One step at a time. The meeting with my mother became a tentative first step toward redefining our relationship. We began to have coffee every few weeks, each conversation a careful navigation of new boundaries. Sometimes we stumbled into old patterns, her making excuses for Brittany's behavior, me feeling invalidated and withdrawing. But increasingly, we found moments of genuine connection. My father proved more resistant to change. When I finally agreed to meet with him a month later, he spent the first 20 minutes listing the ways I had disappointed the family. But even he eventually exhausted his anger, and in the silence that followed, I saw a glimpse of the uncertainty beneath his authoritative facade. I don't know how to be a father to a daughter who doesn't need me, he admitted in a rare moment of vulnerability. I do need you, Dad, I told him. Just not in the ways you've been trying to give. I need your respect more than your financial support. I need you to see me, not just Brittany. He didn't respond directly, but he listened, perhaps truly listened, for the first time in years. Brittany was the last to reach out, and her approach was characteristically dramatic. She appeared at my apartment unannounced one evening in November, mascara streaked down her face. Can I come in? She asked, her voice hoarse from crying. Please? Once inside, she paced my living room, alternating between accusations and confessions. You've always been the perfect one, the smart one, the responsible one, she said bitterly. Do you know how hard it is to be your sister? Nothing I do is ever enough. Brittany, that's not I began, but she cut me off. No, let me finish. I've always known Mom and Dad treated us differently. I told myself it was because they knew you could handle anything and I needed more help. It was easier than admitting I was taking advantage. She sank onto my couch, suddenly deflated. The truth is, I've been offered 3 different jobs in the past year. Good jobs with benefits and growth potential. I turned them all down because I'm terrified of failing. Of trying something and not being immediately amazing at it, the way you always seem to be. It was a stunning admission from the sister who had always seemed so confident, so certain of her place as the family favorite. I'm not always amazing at things, I told her, sitting beside her. I fail all the time. The difference is that I wasn't given the option of giving up. We talked long into the night, uncovering years of misperceptions and resentments on both sides. I had envied her easy charm and the unconditional support of our parents. She had envied my focus and self-sufficiency. The conversation wasn't a magical healing of all wounds, but it was honest in a way we had never been with each other before. The most surprising revelation came 2 weeks before Christmas, during a cautious family dinner at my parents' house, the first since our estrangement. Brittany announced she had accepted a position as an administrative assistant at a nonprofit arts organization. It's entry-level, she admitted. But they have tuition assistance for employees pursuing relevant degrees, so I'm going to take night classes in arts management. My father looked uncertain. Honey, if you need help with tuition, we could No, Dad, she interrupted firmly. I want to do this myself. Actually. She glanced at me nervously. I've been meaning to tell you both. I have savings. Quite a bit, actually. My parents stared at her in confusion. I never spent all the money you gave me for my ventures, she explained, looking uncomfortable. I kept some back each time in a separate account. I told myself it was emergency money, but really, I think I was creating a safety net, so I never had to be truly independent. The revelation was met with stunned silence. All those years of financial support, all those bailouts, while she had been secretly accumulating a nest egg. My father's face flushed with anger, my mother's with hurt. "Why would you deceive us like that?" my mother finally asked. Brittany looked to me, a silent request for support that would have been unthinkable months earlier. I nodded encouragingly. "Because it was easier than admitting I was afraid to grow up," she said simply. "Easier than facing the fact that Allison was right about me all along." The conversation that followed was difficult but necessary. My parents confronted their enabling behavior, Brittany acknowledged her manipulation, and I recognized my own role in maintaining the family dynamic by alternating between acquiescence and resentment rather than clear communication. We were far from healed as a family, but we were finally honest, and in that honesty lay the possibility of something healthier than what we had before. Meanwhile, my own life continued to transform in ways I hadn't anticipated. The majority of the house proceeds remained invested in a diverse portfolio, securing my financial future. But I used a portion as a down payment on a small but charming Tudor-style home closer to the city, with a garden that reminded me of my grandmother's but was uniquely mine to shape. My relationship with Michael deepened through the crisis. He had seen me at my most vulnerable and most determined, and his unwavering support confirmed what I had suspected for some time. He was the partner I wanted for the rest of my life. On Christmas Eve, after dinner at his parents' house, he proposed with his grandmother's restored vintage ring, creating a new link between our family histories. Career opportunities expanded as well. The confidence I had gained from standing my ground with my family translated to greater assertiveness at work. I successfully pitched a major campaign to a client we had been trying to land for years, resulting in a promotion to senior marketing director and a team of my own to manage. Throughout these changes, I maintained a connection with the Morales family, receiving occasional updates and photos of their life in what had been my grandmother's house. They had planted a vegetable garden where I had planned one but never found time to create. They had repainted the bedrooms in cheerful colors for their children. They had added a swing set under the largest apple tree. The house was evolving, as it should, becoming the center of their family story rather than a monument to my past. One unseasonably warm day in early spring, at Lydia's invitation, I visited them. Eric had used wood from a fallen oak on the property to craft a small bench for their front porch, inscribed with a simple message, "Elizabeth's Legacy." It was their way of honoring the house's history while making it their own. "We found something we thought you might want," Lydia said, leading me to the kitchen. She opened a drawer and pulled out a tarnished silver bookmark with an intricate floral pattern. It was behind the built-in bookshelves when Eric was reinforcing them. I recognized it immediately. My grandmother had used it in her Bible for as long as I could remember. Holding it, I felt a wave of gratitude not just for the object itself, but for the woman who had loved me enough to give me both roots and wings, who had trusted me to find my own path even when it diverged from family expectations. "Thank you," I said, closing my fingers around the bookmark. "This means more than you know." As I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror at the yellow farmhouse growing smaller in the distance. For the first time, I felt no regret, no sense of loss, only appreciation for what the house had given me, both in my grandmother's lifetime and in its eventual sale, the means to create boundaries, the courage to enforce them, and the freedom to build a life truly my own. It's been just over a year since I sold my grandmother's house, a year of profound change and unexpected growth. The family gatherings that once filled me with dread have become more genuine, if still occasionally awkward. We are learning, slowly and imperfectly, to relate to each other as adults rather than remaining locked in childhood roles. My father and I have established a cautious new understanding. He still struggles with my independence, still occasionally slips into the authoritative tone that assumes his judgment supersedes mine. But he's making an effort, asking questions rather than making pronouncements, acknowledging my achievements without comparing them to Brittany's. Last month, he asked my advice about a retirement investment option, a small gesture that signaled a significant shift in how he sees me. My mother has changed the most visibly. Our coffee dates have become a regular fixture, evolving from careful navigation of past hurts to genuine interest in each other's lives. She recently confessed that she started therapy, inspired partly by seeing the positive changes in my life. "I don't want to repeat my mother's mistakes," she told me. Or my own. Brittany's transformation has been both the most dramatic and the most tenuous. She completed her first semester of night classes with a 3.8 GPA, proudly showing me her transcript without our parents' knowledge, a private moment of connection that would have been unthinkable in our previous dynamic. She has remained at her job for 9 consecutive months, the longest she's ever committed to a single position. There are still moments of entitlement, still occasional attempts to revert to old patterns, but she catches herself more often than not. "I'm trying to be more like you," she admitted during a rare sisters-only lunch. "Not in everything. I'll never be as organized or disciplined. But in taking responsibility for my choices. I'm trying to be a little more like you too," I confessed, surprising us both. More willing to take risks, to not have every step planned out. The truth is, we are both discovering that we had internalized unhealthy extremes in response to our parents' differential treatment. My excessive self-reliance was just as much a reaction as her dependence. Finding a healthier middle ground has been liberating for us both. Last week, Brittany signed a lease on her own apartment, modest but charming, and within her actual budget. She furnished it with secondhand finds and DIY projects rather than the high-end pieces she once considered essential. When she gave me a tour, pride radiated from her as she pointed out a coffee table she had refinished herself and curtains she had sewn from fabric found at a thrift store. "It's not perfect," she said, gesturing to the slightly crooked curtain rod. "But it's mine. I did this." The look on her face in that moment, genuine pride in her own effort rather than the hollow satisfaction of getting her way, made me realize that the loss of the house had ultimately been a gift to both of us. For me, it had been the catalyst to establish boundaries. For her, it had been the push to discover her own capabilities. My relationship with Michael has deepened through this journey. We're planning a small wedding for next spring with a ceremony in the garden of our new home. My mother has thrown herself into helping with preparations, channeling her need to be needed in ways that support rather than undermine my choices. Even my father has shown unexpected enthusiasm, offering to build an arbor for the ceremony based on a design Michael and I selected together. The financial security provided by the house sale has allowed me to take professional risks I might otherwise have avoided. 6 months ago, I was offered a position with a smaller marketing firm that specializes in campaigns for environmental and social justice organizations. The salary was slightly lower than my corporate role, but the work aligned more authentically with my values. Having investment income as a buffer gave me the freedom to accept the position. The fulfillment I've found in this work has been worth far more than the difference in pay. True to my promise, I established the Elizabeth Reynolds Horticultural Scholarship at the local community college. This spring, I met the first recipient, a young woman working her way through school while supporting her younger siblings. Seeing her determination and hearing her plans to create urban garden spaces in underserved communities, I felt my grandmother's influence extending beyond her life and mine into a future she would never see but had helped make possible. The scholarship is funded in perpetuity, ensuring that regardless of what happens in my life, this aspect of my grandmother's legacy will continue. There is comfort in knowing that long after I'm gone, students will still benefit from her foresight and generosity, just as I have. About 3 months after my visit to the Morales family, I received a small package from them. Inside was the bookmark they had found, now professionally cleaned and restored, along with a handwritten note. "We found her journals. We thought you should have them." Beneath the note were 5 more volumes of my grandmother's journals, spanning the years before those I had already recovered. That evening, I sat on the porch of my new home and opened the earliest journal. In an entry from 30 years ago, my grandmother had written about watching me as a toddler, determinedly trying to climb onto a chair much too big for me, refusing help despite repeated falls. "Allie has such spirit," she had written. "Martha worries she's too stubborn, but I see something else, a determination to find her own way, to stand on her own 2 feet. This quality will serve her well someday, even if it makes her path more difficult at times. My hope is that she'll learn to balance this independence with the wisdom to accept help when it truly serves her, to distinguish between support and interference. I hope I can teach her this before I'm gone." Reading her words, I felt the circle close. The house had never been the true inheritance. It had been this wisdom, this understanding of myself, this permission to chart my own course while remaining connected to those I love. Last weekend, I planted a small orchard in the backyard of my new home, 6 apple trees of the same variety that grew at my grandmother's house. Michael helped me dig the holes and mix the soil amendments. As we worked side by side in the spring sunshine, I thought about cycles and legacies, about what we inherit and what we create. The saplings looked impossibly small and vulnerable, nothing like the sturdy trees of my childhood memories. It will be years before they bear fruit, years more before they provide meaningful shade. I may not see them reach their full maturity in my lifetime. But in planting them, I honored both the past and the future, my grandmother's legacy and the life Michael and I are building together. That evening, as we sat on our porch watching fireflies emerge in the gathering dusk, Michael asked what I was thinking. About something my grandmother used to say, I told him. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. He smiled, taking my hand. Wise woman. She was, I agreed. And she taught me the most important lesson of all, that standing up for yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary. You can't truly give to others until you honor your own worth. The journey from that painful family dinner to this peaceful evening hasn't been easy or straightforward. There have been setbacks and difficult conversations, moments of doubt and lingering grief. But through it all, I've found a truth that grows stronger with each passing day. The boundaries we establish aren't walls to keep others out, but foundations upon which healthier relationships can be built. By honoring my grandmother's gift in my own way rather than bending to my family's expectations, I didn't lose them as I had feared. Instead, I created the possibility for a more authentic connection, one based on mutual respect rather than obligation or guilt. In selling the house, I gained something far more valuable, the freedom to define family on my own terms, to love without losing myself. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision that ultimately led to positive change in your relationships? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe if this resonated with you, and share with someone who might need encouragement to set healthy boundaries in their own life. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is trust your own judgment, even when those closest to you disagree. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.